Hey Derek, this is Keaton Everett with ABC, going over your pitching video from camp. I'm going to go through and look at your motion, talk a little bit about mechanics, and just sort of a few things that I'm seeing on your video. And we're just going to talk a little bit more about, maximizing our body, kind of pause it in a few couple spots throughout the delivery to sort of see where we're at, ways we can kind of make ourselves more efficient, a little more consistent, and especially for you is kind of rethinking how our lower body's working. It's pitching's all about using our legs, using our hips, and just kind of working down the mound. And with you right off the bat, you're dropping down quite a bit, losing a lot, and we'll kind of go through and talk a little bit more about that at each step. So basically, right off the bat, we always look at the setup. All right, we always look at how we start dictates so much of how we're going to finish. All right, if we're not starting well, if we're not starting right, we're not going to be able to finish right. All right, so basically what we look at is what you do throughout that first initial leg lift. All right, so what you see in here is, we're going to look at right where that knee gets to its highest point, which is right here. All right, you see your head has sort of dipped down in that circle. You're staying over your backside real well, but what's happening is you're seeing a little bit of movement basically kind of diagonally down. So what that's doing is that's kind of moving your head out in front of your foot, where we want to try to keep it back over that back foot. All right, so right where we sort of initially come set, right here, you're doing good at having that head over that back foot. We just want to try to keep it locked down over that back foot. All right, because all you're doing is you're just kind of leaning forward a little bit, kind of letting that upper body get down ahead of your lower body, whereas we want that lower body to be leading and getting out in front of our upper body. All right. So one of the things that will help you setup wise is just to get your feet a little bit wider than they are right now. All right. We don't need to get too crazy wide, but something that's just a little more athletic, where you're just a little more balanced. All right. A lot of that sort of that lean forward is just it's just hard to balance feet close together. If someone's going to try to push you over, you want to have a little bit wider base. So we don't need to get too wide, but just a little bit wider, so we're just a little more balanced. And then you can see your feet are kind of even with each other. We just want that right foot closed down a little bit more. All right, so just kind of move this foot out here to close that off a little bit more, which will get your hips in a little bit better position. All right. Glove-wise, we usually like to see this glove tucked in a little bit closer to your body. If you're coming set with your hand and your glove kind of farther away from your body, the farther away from your body, that's just kind of moving that balance point out away. You just want to try to stay a little bit more compact. It kind of helps with your arm path, because if you're out away from your body, your arm kind of wants to go back behind your hip anyways, so it just has a little more room to travel, a little more margin for error, and it's just not as efficient. All right, so once you kind of get that set up, all right, that's just going to help you out a little bit more. Okay, so as you're coming up, you can see that lean start to happen, which I kind of talked about a little bit more, but we want to try to stand a little bit more straighter up. But the biggest thing here is watching what your upper body does in relation to your lower body and your hips. All right, so once you get to that highest point right here, all right, you see how your head pops out of that upper circle, and your hips haven't even left this box down here. All right, so you're seeing how you're kind of doing that drop and drive technique. Now your hips are coming out of that box, whereas we want those hips to come out of your box right as that foot's starting to go down. So right at this point, as this leg's starting to come down, we want to see hips going forward instead of going down. So right now we want to be seeing this going forward and not going down, but you see how it's going down and then forward. We just got to get going down the hill a lot quicker. All right, so what we need to sort of get the change of thought process is we want to think, hips going towards the hitter, that back pocket going to the hitter, and we want to think knee rotating sort of diagonally down. All right, we don't want flexion in our knee where we get sort of down to that 90-degree angle like you're getting to. If we kind of sink it forward here, you're almost completely bent at 90 degrees. We don't get our power from our knee flexion right here. Where we get our power is from our hips. Alright, so all this is doing is just kind of dropping you down. You're making yourself shorter. You're not going to be able to get on top of the ball more, but you're just kind of choking off your hips. So what we want to try to see you do is, as that leg starts coming down, those hips start going forward. Alright, the upper body's staying back behind the hips. It's nice and straight, good posture. And we want to try to see this head follow a little bit more of a straighter line down towards the plate instead of popping down below the line and then sort of coming back up. Alright, so we just want to try to stay a little bit taller and get more of our momentum from our hips. Alright, so then as we're kind of sinking through here, at this point, I'd like to see you probably a little bit more right about here. Alright, your front foot still hasn't come past, so your hips are still leading. You're probably right about around here height-wise. Alright, whoops, my bad there. And then as you're kind of sinking forward, at this frame, you should probably be a little bit more starting to turn that knee down a little bit farther out here. Now that foot's kind of starting to swing open. You're just kind of losing all those legs. So we just need to get yourself going down the hill quicker, going down the hill farther, to really utilize that lower body. And that's just the biggest key for you. Just work on getting to your balance point and then just starting the hips down towards the mound instead of dropping down. Alright, so now we're going to look at our foot strike. So foot strike's right when that front foot hits the ground, which looks like it's about right here or so. Alright, try to mark off about 5 or 6 shoe lengths, one over the other, and try to get an idea of kind of where you need to be landing. It looks like you're landing a little bit short, and I say that because your knee's over your ankle. Alright, right at this point. At foot strike, we want to try to see that ankle farther out in front of your knee. So, that's just a matter of just getting another half foot length just a little bit farther out. We just want to stride down the hill, use our legs, extend out to use all that lower body. Alright, arm angle wise, your elbow's at a pretty good height. Alright, we don't, when we see it up above the shoulder, that's sort of a cause for concern injury wise, or really far below, but you got a good angle there. But what you notice here is that this glove has started to rotate in and is basically tucked to your chest. Alright, so all you're doing there is you're just losing this torque. Hip shoulder separation. That's the ability for your hip to turn forward, which you see is happening here, and then your upper body comes later. So you want the hips to turn first and then that upper body. So when you start tucking this glove in here, you're starting to turn that shoulder a little bit prematurely. Alright, so at this point we want to try to see these shoulders not turned yet. Alright, so we're getting to this point where you're probably going to be more about right here, and then that glove's going to be out over that front foot. Alright, so you're just kind of pulling that glove into your chest, tucking it in, whereas we want to get that out over that front foot, lock it in place out here, and then rotate our body out towards your glove. So then through release, right about here, we're calling this release, you're going to start to see, instead of this back leg collapsing, you're going to start seeing a little bit more of an angle out here. You're going to get that head out over that front foot, and so now you're going to be creating a little bit better angle out here, getting farther down, releasing that ball closer to the hitter. So now maybe you'll be releasing it about right here. So you just want to try to release that ball, getting that head out over that front foot, and again, that's just extending down the mound more, staying closed a lot longer, and then your finish, you can see how you finish still sort of almost not straight up, but you're still kind of triangular to the ground, whereas at this point we want to see that chest getting thrown out over that front foot, that back leg flying up, and just because you're using so much legs. So the more legs you can use, the more you're going to be able to finish out over that front foot, instead of just kind of standing up through that finish. So anyways, hopefully you kind of see a few things here, but the biggest thing is just get away from that dropping down really far, stay in those legs a lot longer, but just get going down the mound a lot quicker. So hopefully you had a good time at camp. Thanks for making it out, and we look forward to seeing you again with ABC.